Thank you, everybody here, and welcome to TechCon SoCal. When asked, 95% of parents say that their number one job is taking care of their child. Usually that starts with some kind of combination of keeping them happy, healthy, and safe. From the very first moment that a parent holds their newborn in their arms for the very first time in the hospital, they realize that their life has changed forever, that the world now revolves around that child, and the primary responsibility is taking care of that child. I'm Hans Kullberg. I'm co-founder of Pathfinder Health, but my primary job is being the best dad I can be to my 5 amazing children. I've always known I wanted to be a dad ever since I was a little kid myself. I always thought, hey, I'll let my kids climb up on trees and I'll eat ice cream for breakfast. Well, little did I know at that time, I really didn't know much about being a parent, but as an experienced parent now, I'm still learning and still growing on the job. The first 5 years of a child's life are the most fundamental for entire life. 90% of a child's brain develops before the child reaches the age of 3, a time which neurons and synapses are forming and firing on all cylinders, and that rate of learning is exponential. Parents and caregivers play the biggest role in making sure that that child has the foundational, fundamental, healthiest nutritional development at the very beginning. Like setting the foundation and building a house, that parent is really vital to making sure that they spend quality time with that child and having the best social, emotional, and developmental outcomes. This is Aviva. That one's my, this is my daughter, Aviva. After 9 months of a very healthy pregnancy, my wife gave birth to Aviva on January 5th, 2020. Aviva, ever since the very start of life, was always full of life, full of energy, full of spunk, and had the most contagious laughter. To give you a little anecdote, on a trip up to the great redwoods of Northern California, we stopped on the side of the road, we got some cherries, and she was back there in her car seat, filling up her face, gorging on all of these cherries. And when we stopped the very next time at a pit stop, she had this red face full of cherry juice all over. It looked like she was a little vampire at a murder scene. But she just gave me a little smile, and she really, that was just her personality. She was always very, very happy. Aviva was born fully healthy, was developing fine, but at 9 days old, she had woken up from a nap. She was lethargic. She was having trouble actually breastfeeding, and she was cold to the touch. She was 95 degrees. As third-time parents, we rushed her to the hospital. They admitted her into the neonatal intensive unit, and they realized that her heart rate had dropped to 60 beats a minute, where at that age, it should have been 150 beats a minute. They did a whole battery of tests, metabolic, genetic, everything else. They even stuck a needle. They did a lumbar puncture where they stuck a needle up her back, about this big. And as a parent, that was the most excruciating thing to actually have to go through, to watch their child suffer like that at such a tiny age, at 9 days old. But after a week of poking and prodding, trying to figure out what she had, this team of doctors, they couldn't really figure it out. And so she was able to kind of get back to normal, healthy development, but she was released after a week with no known diagnosis. However, 3 months later, at 4 months of age, she had her second episode. Again, bradycardic with low heart rate. Again, lethargic, not really being able to feed and breastfeed. And so we rushed her back to a different hospital this time, a second hospital, where they did a whole battery of tests. They had a whole team of neurologists, cardiologists, endocrinologists, any kind of ologist, really trying to check her out, poking and prodding her with the latest and greatest, technology in the medical space known to mankind. And after another 5 days there, they had more questions than answers. They were shaking their heads, shrugging their shoulders, not really knowing what to do, conferring with each other, but yet leaving with more questions than answers. She did have some anomalies in some of her charts, but by and large, this is a battlefield and they were searching, but they really couldn't figure out any kind of answers at all for her daughter Aviva. And so over the next 7 months of her life, She would go on to have 3 others, so 5 total hospitalizations, and each time they came out with more questions than answers. And so we're all here today. We're all here living in the age of AI, where data is ubiquitous, where applications are amazing, and the application layer is the engine that we know that powers all of these great end results. However, data is the oil that really powers that application. Healthcare, unfortunately, has never been set up in a way to really utilize AI to its fullest capabilities and fullest extent. And that is because, among other reasons, data is locked in silos, locked away in what's called electronic health records, such that these aren't really interoperable. They're not being used, and data can't be shared and used for research to really advance and promote in situations like these when there is no diagnosis, when the differential diagnosis A, B, C, D, E all fail. We're left with no answers. So what do? Why don't we stick AI on that, on the situation, and really try to get some answers? Well, unfortunately, this isn't the case. And as a matter of fact, on her 5th hospitalization, she was at her 3rd hospital. They had a different electronic health record. They were trying to get her information, get her data from her first 2 visits, but they couldn't get it. We were in the ER, we're talking to the ER doctors, and they couldn't access her records at all. Thankfully, I had 20 pages of handwritten notes as a dad, and they were thankful to have even that basis of information just to know where to start. However, when the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons of the world spend all this time and information really understanding how to get someone to like a button or click something, or make a purchase and really buy something with surgical precision when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to the most critical, foundational life or death situations, getting a diagnosis, we don't have those answers. Unfortunately, this story, my story, my family's story, doesn't have a happy ending. On her 6th episode, again, she was admitted to the hospital. She was admitted to the ER. They did a battery test. This time, it was preceded by vomiting, and that was something different. But she was able, even just on a saline drip, she was able to kind of recover, and she was there even a couple of hours after we admitted, eating a graham cracker, sipping on a straw, and being her joyous, youthful self. However, she had a little bit higher levels of potassium in her blood. If you don't know about potassium, it's what's in the syringe for inmates on a death penalty, because potassium, too high potassium, can automatically stop your heart. So they did a procedure to try to reverse that. It actually had the unintended consequence of increasing her potassium levels. Her heart stopped completely. The oxygen to her brain stopped completely, and her organs stopped functioning completely. They put her on a life support machine, started doing emergency surgery, and we waited in vain over the next 24 hours waiting for a miracle. That miracle never came. And Aviva passed away on November 18th, 2020. And through that journey, one of the things that they allowed us to do was to stay with her. They gave us a couple hours to stay with her, and as I held my dear precious daughter, Aviva, in my arms, I told her, Daddy loves you. I sang to her. And above everything else, I said, this feeling, this unimaginable feeling of a parent losing a child is something I don't want anyone ever to have to feel again. And so I told her I was going to do everything that I can as a dad to make sure that no other parent would actually have to figure that out. Because above and beyond the pain of losing a child, not knowing why she died, not having a diagnosis, after all the post-mortem autopsy even, sitting here 4 years later, we still don't have answers. And so I went on a journey. I took a year off work to really embrace the grieving process. I really didn't have a background in healthcare, but what I did have was a background in data and building products and creating companies. And so I really started asking, really talking to anybody in the medical profession, anyone in healthcare, what can you actually do? What can I do as someone with this background to be able to make sure that every single parent has a diagnosis. And that's where the journey started. So, we live in this world of AI, and I really try to pour over all our medical records, 5,000 medical records, 5 different hospitalizations, but yet trying to figure out what hints, what clues might point to it. And it all came back to, hey, we have this interoperability problem, and really more questions than answers at the end of the day. And so I really started asking myself, how can I make the biggest impact as one human being to make the greatest impact for the greatest amount of parents who are living with what we know, with a known diagnosis. So that's where we started Pathfinder Health. I came across the problem that 25% of all children around the world have some type of developmental delay. Whether that's something mild, such as a speech delay, or something more severe, such as cerebral palsy, or anything in between, autism, ADHD, anxiety. No matter what it is, the one commonality between them all is that the earlier you diagnose, the better the outcomes will be. Unfortunately, only 3%, again, 25% of kids, but only 3% get diagnosed before the age of 3. Again, a critical age where your brain is developing, 90% of your brain develops before the age of 3. And so this was a massive gap that doesn't affect just kids here in the US, but kids around the world. And so I started digging and teamed up with 2 of my co-founders, Paul and Samar, who have both been parents along the same journey. One is a developmental behavior pediatrician, but knowing that there's a frustration of a parent not actually having those answers. And so that's where what Pathfinder, in a nutshell, what we help do is help parents be the best advocates for their child, to collaborate and to gather a lot of data that happens outside the clinic to ensure the best outcomes for their child, collaborating with their pediatrician. So we know that the healthcare system is overburdened and overtaxed. Pediatricians see 24 patients a day, 15-minute checkups, but in that 15 minutes, they're checking eyes, ears, heart, throat, everything else. But when it comes to the child's development, social, emotional, cognitive, language, and movement, they have very little time to really understand how that child's developing. So yes, pediatricians have a lot of knowledge, but very little time. Whereas parents, they spend a lot of time with their child. They're in the best place to actually observe and how their child is actually doing, and also motivated, right? But yet have very little knowledge of how their child's developing. And so what we do is really give them the tools by which they can actually help gather, track, measure, and really observe what's happening to get that in a comprehensive evaluation for their pediatrician to make better decisions at a faster rate. This isn't isolated to just children. We're living in a world where the biggest healthcare crisis that we know is the mental health care crisis. However, what you probably don't know is that 70% of children with underdiagnosed delays end up having mental health issues later in life and challenges. And so this is really at the root cause of a lot of the greatest healthcare problems that we live in today. And so what do? We help measure and track and observe a child's development across 4 different ways. 1, standard developmental screeners for those parents who have ever done a well child visit. You probably know what those are. Being able to kind of check different boxes, check different answers. 2, validating in a clinical way, understanding how a child is developing and really gathering those parent concerns and really abiding by that mantra that, yes, mama really does know best. 3rd, being able to have a continuous tracking of milestones, monitoring what's happening. There's over 400 milestones that happen before the child reaches the age of 5. We know the walking, talking, sitting up, and everything else, but there's a lot of others that actually are really critical to that child's overall development. And then 3, using the latest technology, modern day technology and AI and computer vision, we're able to actually track and really detect where those milestones are happening. And with any given video on a parent's iPhone or parent's phone in general. But we don't stop there. We help empower parents by helping them enhance and promote the healthiest development possible for their child. We connect them to, if there is a concern, we connect them to services such as early intervention services so they have the tools and resources they need to get their child therapy if they need it. However, parents themselves can be 80 to 90% as effective as any kind of therapist, especially for mild to moderate delays. And so we're giving them, activities and parent-led intervention modules so that they know what to do and really being able to take the matter into their own hands when they're waiting in 6, 9, 12-month waiting periods to actually even get to see a specialist or get to see a therapist. And so all of that is personalized, that's tailored, and again, that's using that objective data that we are able to, similar to height and weight charts, being able to give a percentile basis of how that child is actually developing with respect to the peers across those 4 main developmental domains: social, emotional, cognitive, language, and movement. And in a nutshell, we're a pediatrician's eyes and ears outside the clinic. We're helping a pediatrician really understand in a comprehensive fashion how that child is developing and really make better decisions within those 15 minutes that they have with them. The pediatricians really love what they can see and really be able to observe the things that they can't see in clinic. And we're a clinical decision support tool. We're connected to over 100 different electronic health records, pushing that data to pediatricians to get really that information in a high fidelity, objective manner. Finally, this is not just a family's problem. While the family certainly bears the emotional burden of having a child with developmental delay or a non-diagnosis overall, the actual financial costs of developmental delays amounts to $300 billion, and that falls on the shoulders of 3 different main payers, main entities: government, health insurers, and employers, self-insured employers in particular. They're the ones actually paying those medical bills and paying those claims at the end of the day. What we believe through a proactive, preventative, and also objective approach to actually observing development, we can help make a really big dent in this $300 billion figure, lowering the overall prevalence of delays, but also helping parents proactively engage. And so when you think about it, we're saving a Fortune 500 company on average $20 million, about 50% of their cost of pediatric care, for a fraction of that cost, really achieving the double bottom line, helping the employer do the right thing for the family, but also at the end of the day, save a ton of money on their bottom line. And instead of subjective data, we have objective data that's filled with a lot of information, filled with a lot more knowledge, and a snapshot takeaway. Instead of shoulder shrugs, we're bringing hugs to the table. Instead of not having answers to questions, we're bringing those answers to pediatric clinics, to parents, to families, to households at the end of the day. And what that amounts to is a healthier society, a healthier family, and maximum developmental outcomes for each child. In closing, when I went through, and my family went through our darkest hours, those days, those weeks after losing our dear daughter, Aviva, I started harnessing the greatest energy and the greatest power known to humankind. And no, that's not the next Bitcoin rig mining the next cryptocurrency. And no, it's not the next NVIDIA chip powering the latest and greatest ChatGPT release. But that power, that energy, was born out of a personal motivation and a promise of a dad fulfilling a promise to his daughter. And in the process, helping parents become the best parents they can possibly be, becoming the best advocates for their child, and having those really engaging discussions with the pediatrician to ensure that parents are doing their number one job to the best they can be, making sure that that their child is happy, healthy, and safe. Thank you.